I'm Catherine Hager. I'm clerk of the Circuit Court for Queen Anne's County. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. Before we begin the memorial service, I would like to take this opportunity to make a couple announcements. First of all, today's service is being recorded by the great team of QACTV. We are delighted to be able to have today's program documented for historical purposes for our county and this court. As with so many great recordings that QACTV provides to us, it was just 3 years ago on this very same day, April 13th, that QACTV recorded the dedication ceremony of the new Circuit Courthouse for Queen Anne's County. Thank you, QACTV, for being here this afternoon and capturing this service and sharing this with our community. With that, I would like to remind you all to silence any cell phones or electronic devices at this time. Also, restrooms are open and available over on the side of the room over there by these previous sitting judges' portraits over there. And since it's a beautiful day outside, I would welcome you all at the conclusion of this service to carefully exit the courtroom to congregate and mingle in the courtyard outside of this courthouse. Thank you again for being here as we fondly remember the Honorable John W. Sause, Jr. All rise. The Circuit Court for Queen Anne's County is now in special session. The Honorable Chief Judge Joseph M. Getty, Judge Lynn Knight, Judge Brenya Booth, Judge Frank M. Cradaville Jr., and Judge Thomas G. Ross presiding. God save this state and this honorable court.
You may be seated.
Let us pray. O God of grace and glory, we remember before you this day our brother John. We thank you for giving him to us, his family and friends and colleagues, to know and to love as a companion on our earthly pilgrimage. In your boundless compassion, console all who mourn. Give us faith to see in death the gate of eternal life, so that in quiet confidence we may continue our course on earth until by your call we are reunited with those who have gone before, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Now would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Judge Lynn Knight, the Administrative Judge for the Circuit Court of Queen Anne's County. I would like to welcome you today to this special session of the Queen Anne's County Circuit Court as we remember and honor the life and legal career of the Honorable John W. Sause, Jr. Judge Sause served this county and the state of Maryland with distinction. He was the resident judge of Queen Anne's County beginning in 1988 and continued to sit even after his retirement in 2003. Judge Sause passed away on November 28, 2021, and I am honored to preside over his memorial service today. I would first like to introduce Chief Judge Joseph Getty from the Court of Appeals, who is joining us today to honor Judge Sause. Like Judge Sause, Judge Getty has a passion for history. So I was so pleased when he was able to participate in today's service in our historic courthouse. I'd like to welcome him at this time to make the opening remarks.
Thank you, Judge Knight. I have a personal belief that all lawyers are historians. The skills that I learned up the road at Washington College in my history classes weren't any different than the much more expensive legal history class that I took in law school. Lawyers search for the meaning of law in judicial opinions by tracing case precedent and statutory analysis along the path towards defining the rule of law. Historians search for the meaning of life by analyzing the successes and failures across the path of culture and history. Some lawyers restrict their historical endeavors only to the law and legal topics. But other lawyers take a broad approach in their work and their personal lives to explore the many facets of history in their community and state where they live. Judge John Sause was certainly one of the lawyers devoted to a broad study of history. Others today will talk about his legal prowess and his judicial decisions. But to open, I wanted to note that Judge Sause was not only a lawyer and a judge, but he was a historian, especially a leader in this county with the Queen Anne's County Historical Society and other state and local history organizations. Yes, the study of history enlightened his approach to dispensing justice in this part of the Eastern Shore. He would point to the state seal that is on the wall behind me and say, there's a waterman and a farmer, and that is the foundation for what Maryland stands for. He was especially dedicated to the history and architecture of this courthouse. He and Clerk Scott McGlaskin preserved the wooden box with drawers for each election district used when jurors were selected by marbles in the early 1900s. While I have seen similar boxes and marbles in other circuit courts, I've never seen a tabulation board such as the one preserved in Queen Anne's County, and many other circuit court judges probably would have wondered what it was and tossed it out in the garbage. And when I worked for Governor Robert Ehrlich, I attended the ceremony to dedicate the replacement of the Golden Eagle in the architectural pediment that graces the front of this courthouse, and the preservation of the original wooden eagle that is now on display. Judge Sause was very proud that day, just as he was proud of other historical preservation and marker programs and other historical endeavors that he helped to lead. I will close with one other preservation project that is near and dear to the Court of Appeals. When Judge Sause graduated from the University of Virginia Law School, he began his career as a law clerk to Judge William Henderson of the Court of Appeals. When he went in the court's conference room, he was struck by and admired an antique wall clock that was from the 1903 Court of Appeals building, but originally stood behind the chief judge of the Court of Appeals when the courtroom was on the second floor of the State House. It is in the style known as a Vienna regulator clock with a pendulum and a single weight that obviously needs to be wound every 5 or 6 days. When the 1903 building was torn down in 1972, certain items were sold or distributed by the state, and the antique wall clock came into the hands of retired Court of Appeals Judge William Horney. After many inquiries by Judge Sause, Judge Horney personally relinquished the clock and delivered it to Sause. But as Sause said, it was in disrepair and in many, many, many pieces. Being a historian and a preservationist, Judge Sause had the clock restored and repaired, and it hung on the wall in his office for many years. When Judge Sause was a legislative officer in the governor's office, he learned about the Hall of Records, and he later served as chair of the Commission of Artistic Property in what is now known as the Maryland State Archives. And our state archivist, Elaine Bachman, is with us today. In 2010, he offered to the commission to return that clock to the Court of Appeals. The clock now hangs in the small lobby outside of the 1903 paneled courtroom in the 1972 building where the Court of Appeals resides today. Judy, I want you to know, and I think that Judge Sause would enjoy knowing, that the official winder of the antique clock over the past 5 years has been me. And Judy, next week I will teach Judge Booth how to wind the clock so that she can add official clock winder to her list of court duties. And I am sure that Judge Booth, like me, every time I wind the clock, I silently thank Judge Sause for his dedication to the Maryland judiciary and his devotion to the history of this courthouse, Queen Anne's County, and the Court of Appeals of Maryland. Thank you, Judy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Getty. I hope you all will join me in thanking Judge Getty for his service to the Maryland judiciary. Tomorrow is his 70th birthday, and he will be retiring. No doubt we will still see and hear from Judge Getty. I'm sure he will continue his service to the judiciary and to the state of Maryland in a very distinguished fashion. Joining us today, we have a number of distinguished guests I would like to introduce. The Honorable Lynn Mataglia, from the Judge of Court of Appeals, who is retired now. Lynn?
I share the same birthday as Judge Getty.
Tomorrow's her birthday.
Yeah. Our speakers today, Judge Brynja Booth from the Court of Appeals, our District Court Judge here in Queen Anne's County, Frank Centreville, and without any introduction, everyone in this room knows Judge Thomas Ross, the Circuit Court Judge who is retired now but continues to sit with me in Queen Anne's County. We have many Circuit Court judges who are with us today. We have senior judges who have joined us. We have some Orphans Court judges and our family law magistrates. Pamela Harris, our State Court Administrator, has joined us today. And, of course, Mrs. Sause. Mrs. Sause wanted to make sure that she thanked everyone for all of the cards, the kind words, the flowers, and the honorary donations that came to her following John's death. We have the son and daughter-in-law of Judge Sause, Mr. and Ms. Barclay Sause. We have Miss Gretchen Redden, the sister of Judge Sause, and many personal friends and family members of Judge Sause and Mrs. Sause have joined us as well. I have one of my county commissioners here, Mr. Wilson, is with us, and our county administrator, Todd Mon, and our Department of Public Works staff. And why that is important to me is because all of them are helping me keep this building in operation and keeping it restored and being able to use for services just like this. They have made it a priority, and I am grateful to them in assisting me. State's Attorney Lance Richardson is here, and some of his staff members. Sheriff Gary Hoffman, Major Boardman, Major Amoya from the Queen Anne's County Sheriff's Office. Chief of Police Joe Sabori is here, and some of his officers are out front to make sure we're safe. Our Warden, Lamont Cook, Queen Anne's County Detention Center. And as he happily tells everyone, the oldest serving warden in the state of Maryland, and he is still standing. I want to thank Catherine Hager, our clerk of court. She designed the programs for today's service and has been instrumental in helping put this together. And last but not least, our circuit court administrator, Sandra Smith. Ms. Smith sat with Judge Sause. She worked with him side by side. also with Judge Ross, and now she continues to serve with me. 32 years to this county and to the judiciary as a very faithful employee. Andy. This time, I'm going to introduce the Honorable Brynja Booth, and she's going to make her remarks.
Good afternoon. It's certainly surreal to be here in this historic courtroom and sitting on this side of the aisle. It is difficult to sum up a 50-year career in the span of a few minutes. An accomplished career that included work as a prosecutor, a public defender, a private attorney, and a circuit court judge. The breadth and depth of the legal knowledge possessed by Judge Sause is something that you rarely encounter. Now, as many of the folks in this room know, a judge in a one-judge county must necessarily be a generalist, having basic knowledge of all areas of the law. Judge Sause wasn't a generalist, though. When you went in front of him, you felt like he was a specialist, a jurist who had particular skill and knowledge in all areas of the law. The past few days have been bittersweet ones for the legal community. We recently lost not one, but two great legal giants on the shore. I attended Judge Horn's funeral last weekend, and I know a lot of the folks here did as well. I was his law clerk in 1996, and I met Judge Sause in my capacity as his law clerk. I remember that prior to meeting Judge Sause for the first time, Judge Horn stated that for as many years as I would practice law in Maryland, I might not ever encounter a judge as brilliant as Judge Sause. Judge Horn and all of the other judges on the shore had immense respect for Judge Sause's legal mind. I recall a particularly difficult case during my clerkship that year in which Judge Horn had a conflict. And when Judge Horn realized he couldn't hear the matter, I can hear him clear as day telling his assignment clerk, "Mrs. Dick, this is a case that has Sauce's name written all over it." After my clerkship as a practicing attorney, I quickly learned that Judge Sause required two things of attorneys who appeared before him. Number one, be on time, and number two, be prepared. Because I followed these two simple rules, I had very pleasant experiences when I appeared before him. Most of my cases in front of Judge Sause involved land use or real estate or zoning litigation, and as such, these were court trials where Judge Sause was both the fact finder and the arbiter of the law. In preparing these remarks, I went back and looked at the cases I had tried in his court and elsewhere around the state where he was the trial judge, and I realized that he and I had a pretty good track record. I had a good one when I appeared in front of him, and he in turn had a good track record when those cases were appealed to Annapolis. When you tried a case before Judge Sause, you had to be prepared, because he was. When you argued a legal issue in front of him, you felt like you were in an appellate court in Annapolis. It was an engaging exchange of ideas. You needed to be quick on your feet and prepared to distinguish other cases and argue your legal position forcefully. You had to assume that he knew your case better than you did. And the lawyers who practice land use and real estate law, and I know there's a few of them here today, were delighted when Judge Sause was assigned to your case. During my legal career, I often encountered Judge Sause as my trial judge in other counties where the resident circuit court judge might request that he preside over a case in which he was particularly suited. I remember one such case in another county. It was a 2-day court trial involving a nuanced legal real estate matter. I was trying the case with my partner, David Thompson, and two other experienced real estate attorneys, who are not here today, were present around the other side. Going into the trial, the clerk's office had not disclosed to trial counsel that the matter would be tried in front of Judge Sause. When the bailiff said, "All rise," and David and I looked up, to our delight, Judge Sause took the bench. Almost immediately, David and I turned to one another and said, "Yes, we have Sause." And at the same time, we heard opposing counsel say, "Shoot, it's Judge Sause." only they didn't say shoot. Suffice it to say, we won the case and Judge Sause was affirmed in Annapolis. He was well known for his beautiful, meticulously crafted opinions. The land use bar would circulate them amongst each other, even if you were not on the case. You might receive a call from another attorney, let's say Joe Stevens perhaps, who would say, "Did you read that opinion that Judge Sause just authored on zoning estoppel?" And you would rush to get your hands on the copy as if it were a landmark case handed down from the Supreme Court. His written word rivaled the opinions of the best appellate judges in the state, and they had a ripple effect across the state. Each opinion that he authored here in the circuit court was like a stone being thrown into the water that created waves that found their way into the appellate opinions of the state. I remember a case that I had in 2007 involving the Talbot County, the Critical Area Commission, and all of the incorporated municipalities in the county. The case involved growth allocation that had been divided up by Talbot County to the municipalities back in 1989 after the critical area law was adopted. By 2003, Talbot County regretted its decision to divvy up the growth allocation and decided to adopt legislation to take it back from the municipalities. Suffice it to say, litigation ensued, and it seemed like every lawyer in Talbot County was involved in the fight. Judge Sause, true to form, was specially assigned to hear the case, and he ruled in favor of the incorporated municipalities and authored a beautifully written opinion. The opinion describes not only the dispute between the parties, but also the rich history of the critical area legislation and the nuances of the state growth allocation regulations. The case was appealed to the Court of Special Appeals, which affirmed Judge Sause's judgment in a reported opinion. If you pull up the case on Westlaw today, you will see a nicely written opinion by a 3-judge panel in Annapolis that describes the critical area laws and growth allocation concepts. What will not be evident to anyone other than trial counsel is that Judge Sause's brilliant work forms the foundation of that opinion. It's an appellate judge's dream to have such carefully drafted and thoughtful written opinions by a circuit court judge. Judge Sause's written opinions set the table for the appellate courts in the state to pick up his work and affirm it in a manner that in turn created statewide precedent. His opinions in the real estate and land use arena had an impact upon this entire state that I would say was unmatched and still is. His legacy and brilliance will continue to live on in the cases in which he authored these opinions that the appellate judges in turn have incorporated into opinions having statewide impact. And for that, I think the citizens of the state will be grateful for. And now I will turn it over to Judge Cradaville.
Good afternoon. Let me begin by first thanking Judge Knight for organizing this ceremony and also giving me an opportunity to say a few comments about Judge Sause. I met Judge Sause in the fall of 1997, nearly 25 years ago, literally as my first day as an assistant state's attorney here in Queen Anne's County. I quickly learned that things were going to operate a little bit differently here than they did in Prince George's County, where I had been trying cases as a prosecutor for a number of years. The first day I started was a Monday, and I had agreed to handle a jury trial in this courtroom on that Wednesday, and so I needed to review the evidence in the case. When I called the police officers in the case to ask about seeing the evidence, they advised me that unlike Prince George's County, in Queen Anne's County, evidence that had been submitted at the motions hearing was actually held in a locked vault on the bottom floor of this courthouse. Though I found that a little bit strange coming from Prince George's, I went to the clerk's office and said, introduced myself, said I would like to look at the evidence if I could. Clerk's office said, I'm sorry, we can't help you. You're going to have to see the judge. Not a judge, mind you, the judge. I walked up to through the staircase here to the door that I thought was the chambers. tried to open the door and found it locked, I was puzzled, thinking perhaps I had the wrong door, and realized there was a buzzer that you had to push to get in. I pushed it. I was met for the first time by Sandy. She introduced me. I went into Judge Sause's chambers, which many of you know would be clearly described as cozy, with files and books everywhere. Introduced myself, told him why I was there. He granted my request, and I was ushered downstairs with the sheriff to the locked vault to review the evidence. That was my first day in Queen Anne's County as an assistant state's attorney. And coming from Prince George's County with 800,000 people and 21 circuit court judges, one of which I had clerked from, I learned quickly the difference between a jurisdiction like that and, as has been mentioned, practicing in a one-horse town. Or as our current state's attorney, and at that time assistant public defender, told me jokingly, I had left Prince George's County and entered the House of Sause. Following my first trial here, and in the following months and years, I would learn, as others knew, a number of things about Judge Sause. As was already articulated, he was clearly very intelligent. That was demonstrated not just by his analytical prowess on the bench, but also clearly by graduating with honors from one of the finest, if not the finest, liberal arts institution in the country, as well as one of the best law schools. Second, he was very knowledgeable in all areas of the law, so much so that when you were having legal debates and discussions with him, even in areas that you thought you should have the expertise, it was clear that he knew substantially more than you did. And third, as has been discussed at length over the years, he was tough. True, he could be tough on attorneys and others that were appearing before him. And yes, perhaps not every criticism or judgment he made was correct, but that could be said for all of the judges that are sitting here today. In fact, as Scotty will remember, no doubt, and Mr. Richardson will recall, I had a few disagreements with him myself, one of which became quite legendary. But we cannot ignore the fact that the source of that frustration and ire much of the time was legitimately based on the fact that from his perspective, the system of justice was not working as it should. Judge Sause believed that the system should work. As was said, he believed that lawyers appearing before him should be on time, should be prepared, and should be knowledgeable about the law. Crazy as it was, he thought that defendants that had been ordered to appear should appear. He believed jurors that had been summoned for jury duty to perform their civic duty should appear, or there should be consequences. Officers summoned should appear on time, should be prepared. Probation officers that were required to monitor probationers should do their jobs to make sure that the probationers stayed on the right path. Juvenile justice counselors should do their jobs to make sure that young people didn't come in and out of the system and ultimately come before him for a more serious offense for which he would have to take serious action. He had little tolerance for attorneys who weren't prepared or others within the system that clearly weren't doing their job. It offended him when the system didn't work, and he believed accountability was necessary to make sure that it did. In short, he believed that in order to have justice, there had to be effective advocacy on both sides. In order to have rehabilitation, there had to be effective supervision and services. And that in order to have a peaceful civil society, there had to be appropriate respect for the rule of law and the court. Those expectations were not unreasonable. And having been on the bench myself for now 10 years, I understand some of his frustrations and share some of his concerns. So much of that toughness that he demonstrated was related to the fact that he wanted to make sure the system worked. Part of it was also driven, in my view, by his belief that he had a responsibility to punish those that consistently victimized others. He believed he had a role to protect further victimization and to protect those that had been victimized. That toughness was rooted in a severe empathy for those that had been victimized. In fact, when he was appointed back in 1988, he noted that the one person the system has entirely lost is the victim. I do not think Judge Sause took pleasure, any more than any of the judges here do, in giving out tough sentences. I think he did so because he believed he had a responsibility to do it and likely hated doing it as he was doing it. His view in that regard, with regard to victims, has particular significance in today's ongoing criminal justice debate. It was his sense of that responsibility, I think, in adult court that prompted him to spend so much time and effort on juvenile offenders and the juvenile justice system. I think he truly believed in the principles of the juvenile justice system of treatment, guidance, and rehabilitation, and he wanted to do everything he could to prevent people, young people, from continuing on their path of criminality and ultimately appearing before him in circuit court. I repeatedly witnessed him during my years as an assistant state's attorney and also when I served as state's attorney bring young people up to the bench in an attempt to connect with them, to guide them, and yes, if necessary, to discipline them in hopes that they would not come before him later in adult court. So Judge Sause was smart, he was knowledgeable, and yes, he was tough. But as I said, the toughness was based on a belief that he had a responsibility to make the law work not just for victims, not just for offenders, but for the public at large. Because as he noted in 1988, again when appointed, the law has no reason for being except to serve the public. Judge Sause spent his time on the bench and the majority of his life doing just that, doing his best to make sure the law worked for the public. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I too want to thank our Administrative Judge Lynn Knight and the Sause family in particular for allowing us to put on this special session to remember Judge Sause. Actually, I did get a call from Judge Crowderville way back in the mid-1990s saying, should I come to Queen Anne's County? I said, yeah, come. And I think, look where we are. I'm not sure how I was placed in between a former congressman and a six-term clerk, but I'll try to do the best I can. It is fitting that this memorial session is being conducted in the historical courthouse, where Judge Sause spent so much time as an attorney and judge and had such a keen interest in the courthouse, Queen Anne's County, and its history. I'm honored to be here with you. My law practice was based in Prince George's County when my family and I moved into an 18th century home near Centreville in early 1988. By then, I had already spoken with then attorney John Sause more than once. He represented the sellers of that house, and from our conversation, I found him to be witty and charming fellow. Judge Sause was exceedingly experienced when he became a circuit court judge in December of that year. Exceptional educational background, over a 30-year career, stints as prosecutor, attorney general, legislative advisor to the governor, district public defender, trial magistrate, diverse private practice, a go-to lawyer for complex matters, not to mention his status as a newspaper owner and with Judy as pillars of the community. One-judge counties are different from others. As an attorney, rather than thinking of the county in which you are appearing with its several or more judges, you are thinking about the judge you are appearing before, the only judge, the one responsible for every case, all of the goings-on in the courthouse. As Scott McGlashan used to say, you are the one responsible for the administration of justice in Queen Anne's County. So it was with some trepidation that I initially appeared before Judge Sause. There were some things that became clear very early on. First, when that buzzer went off, you better get out of the way, and you better be prepared because Judge Sause had a laser tongue and he could cut poor arguments to ribbons. Saw it happen many times. He had a vast vocabulary, and on occasion it was hard to figure out if he found your argument to be persuasive or not. He expected the lawyers to be on time and prepared, exclamation point. He had computer expertise when my office was still transitioning from IBM Selectric and Wang word processing. He wrote his own opinions, was meticulous in doing so. He had well-organized dockets and expected the files, which in those days were these huge paper files. By the way, for those that don't know, since 2016, completely electronic. It's amazing. So he was responsible for each and every case. And those files were maintained by the clerk in a particular way. The job of a circuit court judge can be so isolating that it's hard for a lawyer to figure out where they stand in the eyes of the judge. I had a wonderful secretary, Sause. I would tell my law partner, who's now a judge in Prince George's County, that she, not he, was my right-hand man, who was able to banter with Judge Sause and Scott McGlash and was able to get some sense from that. But the day came when, after appearing before Judge Sause in another case, he asked me to approach the bench off the record. So I did. Again, with some trepidation, he whispered, "Tommy," and I hadn't been called that since I was 12 years old. "Tommy, I want you to set up a meeting in chambers with me." So I did. That was my first time in all those years that I had been in chambers. I had no idea what he wanted to talk to me about, but it was life-changing. He said he wanted me to consider filing an application to succeed him as circuit court judge. I really have no words to describe that to this day. I respected him so much that the word honored minimizes what I felt. I was truly humbled. Up until then, I had no thoughts of being a judge. I didn't even know how one went about it. He served as a mentor and supporter not only in that process, but also after I assumed the bench. He spent countless hours with me going through files, talking about cases, bringing in his law clerk, Craig Sewell, sitting back there, now magistrate in Caroline County, and the first of my 18 law clerks. And that was the weekend before my swearing in. We went through files. He showed me significant historical records, deeds, books. We toured the courthouse. And Judge Sause continued to do so after I took the bench. He only had one request of me. I probably could have figured this out, but he had one request. That is, keep Sandra Smith, who was his able assistant. And thank God I did, because she became my right hand. And now the court administrator. Judge Souse's pet phrase after I took the bench was, quote, you don't want me playing in your sandbox, unquote. But I did. I asked his help on many occasions. I felt that I had the experience to do the job, but I quickly discovered that more than half the job was administrative duties too numerous to mention. And that took the most time and instruction both from Judge Sause and from Sandy. Judge Sause had established and maintained a wonderful relationship with the clerk's office. That relationship can be a problem, but that allowed for good communication and partnership to get the court's work done. As has been mentioned, Judge Sause took a particular interest in significant time in cases involving children, both juvenile delinquency and foster care cases. I was unaware at the time, but every year there was a Christmas party for the foster care children. Just after my appointment, I was invited to the first one. A very happy occasion for the children. If you get a chance, there's a wonderful picture online of Judge Sause and Chief Judge Bell in red stocking caps with a former law clerk, Dan Rosendale as Santa, and Scott McGlash in his elf costume. Judge Sause and Judy Sause were wonderful hosts and very thoughtful. Once when my wife and I went on a cruise out of San Francisco, we walked into our stateroom to find a gift and a bon voyage note from John and Judy Sause. As my good friend Dan Saunders, an attorney who's known the Souses longer than I have, said at the time, they are a class act. Truer words were never spoken. Judge John Sause will be remembered because intellectually, I never met his equal. Quoting Jack Sham in his newspaper article following Judge Souse's death, he was a brilliant jurist. As citizens of Queen Anne's County, we're indebted to John Sause for all of his contributions. Judge Don Sause was truly the consummate public servant and leading advocate for Queen Anne's County and its history. Thank you.
Judge Craville, Judge Ross, that's a tough act to follow. I first met Judge Sause in 1994. I never could get ahead of Judge Sause, never could. I tried, never could. He called me on the telephone, he says, Mr. McGlashan, says the election results are official in Queen Anne's County. You are now the newly elected clerk of the circuit court. I think we should meet. I said, yes, sir. When and where? My chambers, Saturday morning. I came down and we met. And we spent about 3 hours in this courthouse going all over it. And we came back to his chambers. He said, do you have any questions? I said, Judge, I'm going to have a lot of questions. I said, I'm going to need a lot of help. I said, but my first question is, how do I address you, sir? Judge, Your Honor, God. Truly, ladies and gentlemen, he leaned up out of his chair on his desk. He said, how about John? I said, well, sir, I said, maybe when it's you and I, just by ourselves, but I'm sorry. Other than that, it's got to be Judge or Your Honor. From that day forward, ladies and gentlemen, we built a trust and a working relationship that I will remember forever, Judy, forever. Everybody says Judge Sause was old school. He really wasn't. He was a modern man. When I came in, the clerk's office, typewriters, big docket books. Well, we had 2 computers, weren't even networked. Judge Sause had a network. Remember, Sandy, you had Windows for work groups. And he watched me probably for what, Sandy, a year, maybe 18 months. And with the help of the Administrative Office of the Courts and Judicial Information Systems, Pam Harris, who's here today, our great court administrator, state court administrator, I wanted to computerize the office, so we got computers, and so we started working. Then Judge Sause said, he watched me, and then he finally agreed. He didn't tell John Sause anything, you might ask, and cajole, right, Sandy? Of course, I used Sandy a lot. She was my wedge, you know. But he decided that we would combine our networks, and that's what we did. And then he wrote a program called Alt-Z. Remember that, Sandy? Alt-Z. Catherine remembers. He knew macros. He knew his computer. He did the macros. He worked out a case management plan that worked for us, and we got away from the typewriters. I know some of my former clerks are back there, and they wanted to hold on to those typewriters. I wanted them out, and we got them out. And those orders came down electronically to the clerk's office, and it just worked fantastic. Then a rule, I think, was passed that through the state judiciary that there would be case time standards, and that every court had to write a case management plan. Well, ours was somewhat already done. I mean, and I saw some that were turned in across the state, 1 and 2 pages. Ours was what, Sandy, 55 pages? You know, something like that. And it left nothing to the imagination. It worked the clerks right through how it worked, the mailing out and the whole 9 yards. So, and the case time standards. The one thing that Judge Sause did, and I liked, he had the 10 tenets of case management. I know Judge Battaglia saw this. We talked about this. There were 10 of them, but the one that I pulled out of here, most important rule, every one of our cases was set for a day certain. No case was left to float out there and be forgotten. There was going to be a day set standard. Judge Sause quickly saw my passion for history. I liked history. And Judge Getty and I have talked about this many times. And he won't tell you, but he saved the jury system, you know, the balls, the marbles and everything. He was at Crumpton And I got a call from Judge Getty. He said, guess what I bought at the auction? The Kent County Circuit Court jury system. Thank you, Judge Getty, for saving that. But so Judge Sause saw my desire to electronically scan all the court records. When I came on board, there were no backups, ladies and gentlemen. Plats, beautiful plats, no backup. Could be walk out of the courthouse. And Catherine helped on this a lot. And I worked with the Maryland State Archives. Judge Sause hooked me up with Dr. Ed Pappenfuss, the state archivist and land commissioner. And I started a relationship with the Maryland State Archives. We started plats.net right here in Queen Anne's County, and it was migrated statewide after that. And also I wanted to scan all the land records. We were the first county in Queen Anne's County. And here again, Judge Sause was there to support me and to get our land records all scanned. All of them were scanned and are on the internet as we speak. Like Judge Crowderville said, I feel Judge Sause did his best work sitting as a juvenile court. The foster care Christmas party you mentioned, they were fun. They were great. Sandy, Catherine, remember, we had a ball with that. And even got a picture, like I say, with Judge Sause sitting on Santa's lap. Remember that, Judge Ross? That was great. That was great. Judge Sause many times was misunderstood, I felt, by lawyers and others. He was very bright. But the thing was, he was very shy. People miss that with John Sause. He was shy, very humble man. He could pull the paint off the wall if he had to. He could, and he would. But as was pointed out by Judge Crowderville, in the interest of justice, often Judge Sause would hear divorce cases and child custody cases, the nastiest kind of cases as far as I'm concerned, where parents would use their children as pawns. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was a tragic mistake to pull in this courtroom, because I've heard John Sause say, if I asked you to do anything for your child, you'd look at me like I was crazy. You would do anything for your child. Now's the time to do that. But if you can't do it, they're going to become my children. And he wasn't kidding. You know, so the one kind of sad story is it's a great day, but Judge Sause and I went to lunch almost every day. And we had a nasty custody case, and we walked outside. And this little boy, he might be 7, 8, 9 years old, Sandy, we called the case the Two Shoes case. Here's this little boy walked out, and Judge Sause walks up to him. He's making conversation. He looks down. He knows he's got a red sneaker on and a green sneaker on. And he says, is this a new fad? He asked the young man, is it a new fad for children? He said, no, sir. He says, my mommy gave me the red pair, and my father gave me the green pair, and I didn't want to make either one of them unhappy. Now, folks, I walked away from that, and Judge Sause said to me, we walked off, he said, did you hear that? At one time in my life, my chest, I could not talk. I couldn't speak. It upset me so terribly. But he did his best work in the juvenile court as far as I'm concerned. Many times he would say to me, Mr. Clerk, we're a nation based on English common law. Hence, we should apply good common sense. That stuck with Judge Valley. That stuck with me. And he said that to me several times, and I used that in the clerk's office. Good common sense. Unfortunately, sometimes we turn the television on, and Carol and I can't leave it on very long anymore. But it doesn't seem to be any good common sense anymore. But also, he told me, any inference to impropriety, is to be avoided at all costs. Ladies and gentlemen, frankly, John Sause made me a better clerk, and I enjoyed every second of it. He had a dry sense of humor, and a lot of people miss that. I quickly learned when he was kidding and when he wasn't kidding. And Sandy kind of helped me there too. But most times, sometimes I'd miss it. He didn't like surprises, did not like surprises, but he loved Christmas. Judy, I want to say to you, Carol and I will never forget those Christmas dinners at your home. and especially when John would read the annual reading of the 12 Days of Christmas. And tears come to our eyes, right. But the story was great, but it was how it tickled him so. I mean, he just loved it. Right, Barkley? Loved it. Gretchen, I always remember and cherish the good times that Carol and I had with you and at John and Judy's with Roger. Roger Redden, ladies and gentlemen, was a special man, my friend, and he was a real lawyer. Judge Knight, thank you for the opportunity for me to say something today. And I want to close and say to Judy and Barkley, Janet, and Gretchen. I know this because John and I talked about it, family, a lot. And he loved my wife, Carolyn. He loved each and every one of you very, very much. And I've lost my best friend. I think 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 speaks directly to the Honorable John W. Sause, Jr. And it says, I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. I will miss my friend. Thank you.
All right, Judge Sause had 15 different law clerks during his time. And as a judge myself, I have learned how much a law clerk means to you in chambers. You develop a strong relationship that helps carry you through some sometimes very difficult days. Most law clerks serve 1 year and work closely in chambers, performing the important function of legal research, legal writing, case management, and of course, all other duties as assigned. There were a lot of them. Judge Sause had a special relationship with his law clerks. Many of those are here today, and I wanted them to be recognized because I knew how important it was to have them in his life and also for them to have him in their life. Mr. Noel Patterson, you want to stand up? Mr. Tim Price, Mr. Dan Rosendale, and Magistrate Craig Sewell. 4 of the 15 are here with us today and who have very distinguished law careers because of their time with Judge Sause. So thank you, gentlemen. Judge Sause was known for his love of his country and for the state of Maryland. In honor, Miss Nancy Cook is going to sing a song for us, the Star Spangled Banner, and she also asked for us to join her in song. So, Nancy?
But first, I am going to read a little something that Catherine Hager asked me to read because we've all heard that Judge Sause was a wonderful historian. I was privileged, and I had forgotten this, to be on the Queen Anne's County Historical Society Board when he was chairperson. We met down in the little addition there and had to go through the courthouse to get outside after our meetings, but he was wonderful, and I enjoyed it so much. Long time ago, though. And so I'm going to read a little something that Catherine said that I might have him remembered by. He loved history, and so I will share with you today in remembrance of Judge Sause. This courthouse and this town of Centreville, which was built simultaneously, was erected on a plantation known as Chesterfield, the ancestral home of Judge Joseph Hopper Nicholson, who was then living on the tract. Later, Judge Nicholson became Chief Judge of the Sixth Judicial Circuit, then comprising Baltimore and Harford counties, and was a judge in the Court of Appeals. He was also a member of the United States House Representatives, who, when he was painfully ill, was carried into Congress to cast the deciding vote for Thomas Jefferson in his battle with Aaron Burr over the presidency. Chief Judge Carol T. Bond once wrote that Judge Nicholson was another one of those half-forgotten personalities who wait by the way to reward historical investigation, and how true that was. And then, because I wanted to know more about Judge Nicholson, I went to my trusted computer, and so I noted that he had participated in the 1812 defense of Fort McHenry, and thus he heard the tune that had been used as the setting for other patriotic lyrics of that day, and suggested the music then for the Star Spangled Banner to Francis Scott Key. And so Francis Scott Key, as most of you know, and I didn't before this time, was Judge Nicholson's brother-in-law. And so such a historian, so much a part of history, and we owe a lot to Judge Sause. But I really would like for you to stand with me and sing the Star Spangled Banner, if you will, and I will give you the right key so that you won't. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets ring clear, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you.
All right, so being the last to make remarks, much of what I would have said today has already been said by our guest speakers. Lucky for all of you, I won't repeat the sentiments that you have just heard. I knew Judge Sause as a young girl, as he was our family lawyer. I would occasionally accompany my dad as we would stop by Judge Sause's law office located across the street where the new courthouse now stands. My recollection of his office was that it was old and creaky, it smelled of tobacco smoke, and was filled to the brim with books and papers. Judge Sause also served on the Centreville JCs with my father, Robert Wilson, and my father's good friend, David Clark. Over the years, my father and Mr. David shared a fair number of amusing stories of Judge Sause at their various functions, most of which I am sworn never to repeat. As a brand new lawyer, I remember receiving a phone message from the court that I was summoned to appear to the court to meet with Judge Sause. When I inquired as to when that would be scheduled, I was advised, well, right now, you better get here. He was well known of summoning people when he wanted to meet with them, and you had no excuse, you had to be there. I first appeared before Judge Sause in this very courtroom in the summer of 2000 when I joined the firm of Foster, Braden, Thompson, and Palmer. I was here for a domestic scheduling conference, and I watched as the 10 or so other cases were called so that I knew where I needed to stand and what was expected. Needless to say, I was shaking in my boots as the reputation of Judge Sause loomed very large in the legal community. As a family law practitioner, most of my courtroom days were spent in this very room with Judge Sause, and then after his retirement with Judge Ross. Because I was rather intimidated to be questioned by Judge Sause, I had to be prepared, usually not sleeping well the night before a big trial. The lessons that I learned from him have taken me well through my legal career. While I was assisting Donald Brayton with the cases for the Queen Anne's County Department of Social Services, I experienced the deep concern Judge Sause had for the children in foster care. You could tell how much he anguished over the cases, making sure he was watching over each child, and making sure the department went above and beyond to make sure every child had an opportunity to have a life. It was not well known by the outside world that Judge Sause would pay out of his own pocket for certain things for children in foster care that the department's budget wouldn't allow. You've heard a lot about the Christmas dinner. I got to go many years and sit with Judge Sause as he spoke with the children. And believe me, the glow on his face was just as magical as the glow on the children's faces. I was appointed to the bench in 2019 and happily sworn in this very courtroom several weeks before my official investiture, but I needed to have that done in this courtroom. I have never had the opportunity to sit on the bench in this historic courthouse, and it is my honor to be able to do so today for Judge Sause. I'm not sure he knew the impression he made on so many young lawyers. You always had to be prepared. You've heard that many times today. You needed to be on time for court because you never knew when Judge Sause was going to show up. And you always had to be respectful of the process and the rules. You did not want to be on the receiving end of his booming voice and his piercing glare from across the bench. He touched many lives in many ways, some of which you have heard here today. Each of us have our own memories of Judge Sause, and I invite you to mingle in the courtyard outside and continue to share those experiences with others. Please be careful when you exit the building. This is a page from Judge Ross. The pews back there are angled. We have watched many people fall out into the floor. Please be careful as you step down and exit the courthouse. On behalf of Queen Anne's County Circuit Court, the Maryland Judiciary, I thank all of you for joining us and remembering the Honorable John W. Sause, Jr. With that, we're going to close this special session. I'm going to ask Reverend Friel to give the benediction.
Let us pray. Almighty God, with whom still live the spirits of those who die in the Lord, and with whom the souls of the faithful are in joy and felicity, we give you heartfelt thanks for the good examples of all your servants, especially your servant John, who, having finished their course in faith, now find rest and refreshment. May we, with all who have died in the true faith of your holy name, have perfect fulfillment and bliss in your eternal and everlasting glory. Amen.
This concludes the service today. Thank you all for being here. And again, please be careful when you exit out the stairs, going down the stairs and out the courthouse, and enjoy mingling outside.